Good evening. My name is Evan Gregory, and this is Bible Answered. We're going to be looking at Acts chapter 25 tonight, and hope that you follow along. We will have the verses on the screen here, and as always, this is brought to you by the North Columbus Church of Christ, located in Columbus, Mississippi. And as always, again, this is a live show. That if you haven't got any questions, comments, feel free to leave those, and I will respond to that. And certainly like to have any type of Bible discussion with you, even if it's not related to the topic at hand. And for at least the last several months, we've been going through the book of Acts. We're fixing to finish up the book of Acts. Again, we're on chapter 25 today, and from I believe about chapter 21, we've been following Paul, and I guess you would call his legal battle with the Jews. Remember, in chapter 21, he went down to Jerusalem. The Jews made up allegations against him, and from there on, he goes and so he deals with a Roman commander, and then he deals with Festus, and then he's currently going to deal with Felix here. And well, I got those backwards. It was Felix and then Festus. Okay, so we see at the end of chapter 24 that Felix has left him Paul bound, but not so much as he's just in a dungeon somewhere. It's almost as though he's on parole. That people can come and go freely and to see him, but he's just not allowed to just roam freely as just any man could. And so he's in that position for a couple of years, and that takes us to chapter 25. I'm getting tongue tied here. And so for this chapter, I'd like to just read the whole thing. There's not, at least for me, there's not a lot that I can say about this when we section off in a few verses at a time. And so I'd like to read this whole chapter, and then at the end, I'd like to make a few points regarding all of this. And so it says, now when Festus had come to the province after 3 days, he went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem. Then the high priest and the chief men of the Jews informed him against Paul, and they petitioned him, asking a favor against him, that he would summon him to Jerusalem while they lay an ambush along the road to kill him. But Festus answered that Paul should be kept at Caesarea, and that he himself was going there shortly. Therefore he said, let those who have authority among you go down with me, and accuse this man to see if there is any fault in him. And when he had remained among them more than 10 days, he went down to Caesarea, and the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. When he had come, the Jews had come down from Jerusalem, stood about, and laid many serious complaints against Paul, which they could not prove, while he answered for himself, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I offended in anything at all. But Festus wanted to do the Jews a favor, answered Paul and said, are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and there be judged before me concerning these things? So Paul said, I stand at Caesar's judgment seat where I ought to be judged. So the Jews have done no wrong, as you very well know. For if I am an offender, or if I committed anything deserving of death, I do not object to dying. But if there is nothing in these things of which these men accuse me, no one can deliver me to them. I appealed to Caesar. Then Festus, when he had conferred with the council, answered, you have appealed to Caesar you shall go. And after some days, King Agrippa and Bernice came to Caesarea to greet Festus. When they had been there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king, saying, there is a certain man left a prisoner by Felix, about whom the chief priests and the elders of the Jews informed me when I was in Jerusalem, asking for a judgment against him. To them I answered, it is not the custom of the Romans to deliver any man to destruction before the accused meets the accusers face to face and has opportunity to answer for him concerning the charges against him. Therefore, when they had come together without any delay, the next day I sat on the judgment seat and commanded the man to be brought in. When the accusers stood up, they brought no accusation against him of such things as I supposed, but had some questions against him about their own religion and about a certain Jesus who had died, who Paul affirmed to be alive. And because I was uncertain of such questions, I asked whether he was willing to go to Jerusalem and there be judged concerning these matters. But when Paul appealed to be reserved for the decision of Augustus, I commanded him to be kept till I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, I would like to hear the man myself. Tomorrow, he said, you shall hear him. So the next day, when Agrippa and Bernice had come with great pomp and had entered the auditorium with the commanders and the prominent men of the city, at Festus' command, Paul was brought in. And Festus says, King Agrippa, and all the men who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole assembly of the Jews petitioned me, both at Jerusalem and here, crying out that he was not fit to live any longer. But when I found that he had committed nothing deserving of death, and that he himself had appealed to Augustus, I decided to send him. I have nothing certain to write to my Lord concerning him. Therefore, I brought him up before you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after the examinations have taken place, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send the prisoner and to specify the charges against him. So we read that, and if you've been following along and you see kind of what's taking place, this should not be a surprise to you. Uh, the Jews have formulated an allegation against Paul, and ultimately the problem that the Jews have with Paul was the doctrine that he was teaching, the doctrine of Christ. And we see where as time went on, it seemed as that tension between him and the Jews grew to the point where everywhere he was going, the Jews were following him around, causing a riot or forming a mob against him. And so what we see here is that these individuals, for example, Felix and Festus, and even the commander of the army or the commander of the garrison uh, at Jerusalem, they realized that. What the Jews were saying that this is not a problem of or an issue of Paul breaking Roman law. It is a question of the Jewish law. And what Paul brings forth is that he did not even break the Jewish law. There is nothing that could be said against him in regards to that any law, Jewish or the law of Moses, any instance there that they could point out and say he broke it or he defiled the temple in any way or anything of that manner. So he didn't break the law, the Jewish law. He didn't even break the Roman law. And what we see here is that, again, the commander, Felix, Festus, they all recognize that this this man really is not deserving of being put to death or deserving of chains. That is really just a question, as one of them puts it, of the Jewish law. And if you're familiar with the Bible, this is not. I mean, I think this is really not something new for Christians. We see even Jesus face these unreasonable charges. We see in John chapter 19, verses 4, and also verses 12, that Pilate recognizes that Jesus is innocent, and that is that the Jews are fussing at him because of what he has told them. All right, that he has broken no Jewish law, or he's broken no Roman law. That he is an innocent man, but yet he still succumbs to the pressure from the Jews and allowing him to be crucified. And so we see the injustice of all of this. But yet, even in the midst of all this, you do see Paul's perseverance in his duty. Even before that, so for example, in Acts chapter 20, when he's talking to the Ephesians elders and others, and before he goes to Jerusalem, we see where he knows that when he's going there, it's already been foretold that he's going to suffer while he's in Jerusalem. And there's others that prophesy saying that he's going to be bound when he goes to Jerusalem. And it's not necessarily explicitly said, but it seems that there were some that think that it's a pretty good chance that he's going to die. And it seems like Paul thinks that it may be a pretty good chance that he dies as well. But regardless of that, it doesn't matter what happens to him, but he's still going to go do what he thinks needs to be done, that he's going to continue to fight. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 7 talks about him finishing that race. He's kept the faith. He's continued on regardless of what has faced him. And he's done what he was supposed to be doing. Regardless of that, ultimately would result in his death. And one last point that I think about in regards to Paul and how he interacts with these individuals is his cunning to avoid persecution. Now, he does not, Paul does not avoid persecution because, out of cowardice or any of that, anything of that manner. But yet he uses the law and his knowledge of Roman law to appeal to Caesar here, not to go to Jerusalem and be held on trial there in Jerusalem, because obviously he would not get a fair trial there. But he was appealing to Caesar, and he's using this Roman law, that I think, to avoid persecution, to receive a fair trial. Because if he appeals, I think what Paul is thinking is that if he appeals to the Romans, they will recognize that this whole thing is nonsense, and he'll get to go about his business. And so what we see here is that Paul is not just if he has to suffer persecution, he will suffer it, but he does not go out without a fight, so to speak. That if there are things that he can do to avoid it, that he can use the laws of the land that are already there in his favor, and using his wisdom and cunning to avoid it when he can. Uh, Jesus told his disciples when he was sending them out to be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And so that means that you use your brain. You think about what you're doing. You be careful in how you go about conducting your business, and you think you have a strategy as to how you're going to go about your work. It does not mean that you just kind of just lay back and let people take advantage of you in all ways. And so again, we see Paul acting in this manner, and again, there's not. I don't think there's. We could go verse by verse and talk about each thing that is mentioned here, but really, Acts chapter 25 is again a continuation of the narrative that began in chapter 21. That we see these different governors coming in, and these different individuals continuing to hear Paul's side of the story as to what's going on, and continuing to see the ridiculousness of the Jews and their allegations against him. And so, as we finish out the book, we'll see Paul's travels ultimately to taking him to Caesar, because we see where he appealed to Caesar, and so therefore he has to go to Caesar, and that where Paul will bring his defense there. And so, again, if you got any questions or comments, feel free to leave here. I just thought there was a few points I could make in this chapter to bring forth, and hope that it's all been useful for you. And as always, I don't always try to, I can't always do it every week. But I try to do these pretty regular on Sundays at 7 p.m. And if you miss our live show, we always keep our recorded videos on YouTube. That is North Columbus Church of Christ. You just subscribe to our YouTube page, and you'll be notified when we have these videos uploaded there. And so, again, I hope this has been useful to y'all, and I hope that you all have a good day and a good rest of the week. Thanks.